Okay, we'll call the meeting to order. Welcome everybody this morning. Just one note, Councillor Hutchison has sent his regrets. He will not be able to join us this morning. I'm assuming that the wedding of his daughter went very well over the weekend. Sorry, son. No, I think it was his, yeah, there was a couple of weddings in town, and I'm pretty sure it's Doug's daughter. Went well, and the recovery is still underway, I'm assuming. I jest. Anyways, if you could, I would please ask you to rise, and we'll take a moment of reflection before we start into the business of the meeting. Amen. Thank you. At this point, I would ask any of the members if you have a declaration of pecuniary interest or general nature thereof. Anyone? Seeing none. If it does arise unexpectedly throughout the meeting, it can be declared at any time. Closed session. Mark, we have no closed session this morning. Public.
Sure, Brent, do you have a closed session?
Is there anything from closed session on property acquisition? Not at this point.
Nothing today. Okay.
Nothing. Thank you, Brent. Yep. Could be some discussion on that. See as it comes forward. Public meetings, we have none. Consent agenda. I have a motion moved by Bev Cutting, seconded by Rob Thompson. Be it resolved that items A1 to C1 inclusive contained in Part 1 consent agenda be adopted as printed, and further that authorization be given for actions to be taken as may be necessary to give effect to the recommendations contained therein. Any questions or comments on this motion? Call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. Thank you, Mark. Mark will hand out those. Oh, sorry, there only was one to on for those minutes. There we go. So that will bring us down to communications from Mayor and Council. Is there any of the council members got any communications, good news, information they'd like to share? Councillor Lawrence. Carol?
I did mention this at Committee of the Whole, but I think it's worth mentioning again. The community of Elmwood is very appreciative of the flowers, and there's a thank you on their public board coming into Elmwood, which says, thanks to Wes Gray for the beautiful flowers. So it's really nice to see it acknowledged and that people appreciate them.
And I believe we had a couple of emails come through in the last week as well, too, from at least two citizens expressing the same gratitude. Okay. Anything else? Go ahead, Deputy Mayor Bell. John?
Well, just at there was different tree plantings done by the Parks Committee yesterday, and to Mr. Earhart, lead hand in Durham, and Tricia Black, hats off to them. They got 4 tree plantings organized in Durham, Elmwood, Newstead, and Ayton, and they were participated, and Councillors Cutting and Hergert were also there, and Mayor, yourself, to your support to them. But I guess all in all, the citizens did appreciate that, and that is some of that gratitude coming from Elmwood was noted by the presence of Mr. Aarons, Mr. Lifeso, and some others at that tree planting up there. But all in all, a good day for West Gray when we got some trees planted, a commemorative 150 for Canada. So that was a good deal. I also had the chance to attend a couple of foundation projects that were going on in Durham, both at the Legion for breakfast and at the hospital for lunch. And our firefighters were there in full glory, and they had different events, Zumba in the parking lot, and that was well attended. And even had a couple of firemen, policemen and firemen in gear doing a little Zumba dancing, so they were getting their exercise. So, good day for participating in West Gray yesterday and Saturday.
Anything else? Rebecca? Councillor Herget.
Yes, I have an invite here for the Alzheimer's Coffee Time this Thursday, October 5th at the Mitchell's property on Varney Road, 262766 Varney Road. That goes from 10 a.m. till 4 p.m. and she's invited all of us and any others who wish to bring their wallets for this fantastic fundraiser. Thank you.
Just the wallets? You don't need a coffee cup?
No, she'll supply the coffee.
Very good. Anyone else? On Saturday, just like to say that the weather was very cooperative for the Bentic Plowman's annual plowing in Bentic. Lunch was out at Lamlash Hall as usual, and the plowing was very good. Very good day for it. I'm not a judge of plowing, so I'm not going to say how the plowing was, but I think it was very well attended. As well, on Sunday, just as a report in our package, we have a retirement notice from Harold McKnight. And maybe that's why Harold's retiring, because on Sunday, him and Lois had their 50th wedding anniversary at Lamlash. So was able to get a certificate to Harold and Lois from that. And with that, thank you everybody for attending the many functions that we do. And if that's it for communications, we have a delegation this morning. Mr. Warren Howard traveled all the way from Listowel, North Perth, to be with us. So welcome, Howard, Mr. Howard, Warren. That's the problem with a man with two first names. You know, it probably not the first. Warren is with us today, has done an awful lot of work and updating on wind turbines. The Industrial Wind Turbine Working Group has been instrumental in getting that up and going, and he wants to give us a presentation this morning on wind turbine noise. So, Warren, I'll say the gray button on your microphone, it's not activated yet, on the base, you'll see a gray button there. Push that, and that will turn your mic on. And if you don't, we're not going to let you speak at all. No, you still haven't got it on. It will. There you go. Now you are live. Adam's recording everything you say. It may be used. No. Thank you for coming this morning. Warren, the floor is yours.
Okay. Actually, the clerk reminded me that I was here almost a year ago, October the 3rd, asking for support for a study of the impact of wind turbines in health. And we ended up with about 10 municipalities who were involved in wind turbines supporting that study. And it was all part of the application that went in shortly after this. I think it was sort of mid-October. And we were looking for a grant from the Canadian Institution of Health Research. It's a highly competitive situation when you're up against the Heart Association and the Cancer Society and looking. But the feedback was actually quite interesting. We didn't get the grant, but the feedback was interesting because they said, like, you have real support, i.e. all the municipal resolutions, that shows us this is a real problem. And you know, we should be looking into this. And then they got off into the statistical validity of the proposed study and so on. So there was some things that we could fix, but and because of the support we had from municipalities like West Grey, we actually, you know, were quite successful. I don't think that's ready for actually showing as a slideshow yet, but anyways, turning to today's topic, thanks for the interest. This grew out of some discussions at the Multi-Municipal Wind Turbine Working Group, and there were people from, oh, so you are going to, okay. There were people from West Grey that came and talked to that group and about the problems they are having, very real problems. And the question always is, what can municipalities do? And so that's what we are here, I'm here to talk about today. I want to talk a bit about what where we are in the problem, where the what the role of the wind company is, what the role of the Ministry of the Environment and Climate Change is, and suggest some questions for follow-up. So essentially, where are we in terms of background? I mean, there's a complaint process where people file complaints with the Ministry of the Environment and Climate Change and the wind company, and people are complaining. The Wind Concerns Ontario filed a Freedom of Information request that covered 2006 to 2014. It took us 2 years to get the information, but that's why we're reporting it now. So it was sort of late January, early February this year we got this. But there was 3,180 complaints in that period. Now, none of those relate to the project in your community because it didn't start till after. We have followed up, of course, as soon as we got the information with the 2015 and 2016, and we're told that the number of pages we're getting is twice what we got in the first one. So very much people are complaining. But we had 458 pages of incident reports, master incident reports. I mean, these are people who complained more than once, and they kind of consolidate them, and then they track what goes on. And what was obvious was virtually no resolution. We went through all of them. There was 2 where there was a resolution of the problem. And largely, the ministry reported to us, it was over 50% they didn't even respond to. And so we have a rather ineffective complaint process. And what happens then is that the residents come to see that the complaint process is ineffective and stop complaining, logically. And I mean, there was examples of people who had complained for a year and a half, month after month after month, incident after incident, and then they stopped. And the conclusion, well, the problem must be solved, so we're going to close this file. And it was over and over and over again. There also is noise compliance audits that the ministry requires. And what we find, and I'll get into this in more detail, is they're not really aligned with the actual noise experience. And amazingly, few, if any, are actually completed. The famous one, or the most egregious one, is the Enbridge project near Kincardine. They've been working on the audit for 8 years, and they still haven't complied with the requirements. There's community liaison meetings, which, having gone back through the minutes in this community, I know you've been quite active, speaking on behalf of your residents, but I think they've finished now, and they never resolved any complaints. So I think there's an opportunity here for municipal action to just ask some questions of the ministry and shine a light on these issues on behalf of your residents. If you want to move to the next slide. My goal here is not to make you an expert in all of the laws, but very high-level summary. The wind company is the front line in this, and they are responsible for responding to complaints of adverse effects. Now, this isn't the noise was too loud. This is any adverse effect, and I'll put up a definition of that later. Just didn't want to repeat it here. And what the Renewable Energy Authority requires them to do is address the cause of each, not once in a while, each complaint, and prevent a similar future occurrence. I mean, that's a pretty high standard. And then they have to report on what they've done to the ministry within 8 days. And then they have to maintain logs for 5 years. So there's a record of what's been going on there. And I think if you go look at the record, just absolutely no compliance with, their requirements and the renewable energy approval. They're also the wind company. This is a self-regulated process. They're required to provide compliance audits. And this is after it becomes operational. They do testing to confirm probably about 5 sites, I think, probably in this project, to confirm noise projections. And they have to hire their own acoustics firm, but they have to use the ministry protocol. And then they have to file 2 reports with the ministry, and these dates relate to your project. And I don't know where it stands because it's all behind the scenes. They changed the protocol in April of this year, and after that, any audit reports given to the ministry has to be posted on the website. There's nothing on the website that I could find. So I don't know where that stands. You may know. Next slide. So the front line is the wind company, but the ministry, can't argue that they don't have any role in this. They're responsible for, and they really do somewhat focus on and do some measurements on the audible noise standards, and that's what's up there. What's interesting is that the approved level as wind speeds get up increase. So it starts at 40, but it actually, if at a ground wind speed of 10 meters per second, it's 51 dBA. But the more important part is below 4 meters per second, because the assumption of this chart is that higher wind speeds mask the sound of the wind turbines. Well, when there's no wind, it's not masked, and that 40 goes right down to 0. And when we start monitoring complaints, I've had some people starting to send me copies of all their complaints. One, it's bearing me an email, but on the other hand, it's interesting learning about what actually is going on. And there was complaints coming in with nominal ground wind speeds of 0. So this comes up again. So the ministry has 3 types of things they respond with. So if they get a complaint, they have the compliance staff have handheld meters, and they go out and do quick assessments. And it can also be used for ongoing monitoring. And we had examples in the complaint reports where in the Melanchthon project, the Guelph district actually was running around on an ongoing basis, proactively monitoring the noise from the wind turbines. The only place we ever saw that happening. They actually did shut down wind turbines at night because they were too noisy. So, it varies from region to district office to district office. If using the handheld meters they see a problem, they then go to what's called Part C of the compliance protocol, which is they set up complex monitoring equipment, and the resident triggers the system when they think there's a problem. And that creates a 10-minute segment, which then they take away and analyze. It's rather inconclusive, generally, because while there was too many birds, too noisy leaves, there was traffic on the road and all of those types of things. But there is a process there operated by the ministry, which is triggered by the resident. And I don't know whether any of those have been done in West Grey or not. And then if they find a problem, then it triggers what is the Part D. That's a full assessment. It's completed by the wind company, is part like similar process to the compliance audit, and the process is flawed. So there's lots of things they can do. That's the audible side. Now, the ministry has responsibilities that extend beyond the audible noise, and they don't really acknowledge those. And so one of the big problems is residents are complaining, and I haven't seen any complaints from here, so I'm just assuming that they are making these complaints, about vibrations they feel but can't hear, about headaches, dizziness, all of those things. Well, those are all linked to infrasound, or low-frequency noise, which is actually not covered by the approval, which is actually very interesting. So the approval covers audible noise, and so the section 14 I'm showing here doesn't apply to audible noise, it applies to all the other stuff. And it is, I'm just, for the purpose of a slide, briefly summarizing it. But, no person shall discharge a contaminant if the discharge causes or may cause an adverse effect. And contaminant is, sound and vibration, which is what people are complaining about. And the definition of adverse effect, which I mentioned earlier, is there's a whole series of things of adverse effects, but the ones that apply here: harm or material discomfort to a person, an adverse effect on the health. So the ministry is responsible for health. Ministry of the Environment is responsible for health. The impairment of safety, and loss of enjoyment of normal use of property. I mean, that's a pretty pervasive definition. And, they have authority to issue stop orders under Section 12, if it's necessary in, reasonable grounds. It's not absolute proof to protect the health of residents. Next slide. I want to turn to the compliance audit, and again, the experts in noise have a great fun with this because it's so full of flaws. But sort of at a high level, there's two problems. The wind industry finds it extremely difficult to complete. That's why the audits are incomplete. And secondly, the residents who've been working on this find that it's completely flawed, and it's almost designed to allow compliance to be proven, if they ever get it done. But the way it is done, it's set up, it's not just total noise, they take away ambient noise. So that depends on when it's done. During the summer, ambient noise, birds, trees, all of those things are quite high, but in the winter, they're quite low. So there's a real timing issue, but the requirement is you can't do it between December and February, which is the quietest ambient noise period. So the push from the wind companies to do it in the high periods. The testing is limited to ground wind speeds, or the requirement is to do it 4 to 7 meters per second. And as I said earlier, a whole bunch of the complaints are below that level because that's when it's more noticeable. The requirement is the turbines have to be operating at or with 90% of their maximum power level. And a lot of studies, including tests in various projects near here, show that the noise is actually worse when the turbines are powering up and down. So the 90% is the optimum. And then the other thing that's showing up, and this is from the K2 project in ACW, they were looking at the ISO website, finding that the project is constrained. So it's not producing any power. They're looking out there, the blades are still turning, and they're whumping and banging and crashing, and nothing is being produced. So, zero power level noise problems. And I don't know how dense the turbines here are, but in certain areas where homes are literally surrounded by wind turbines, I have a real problem with the protocol because it assumes there's one turbine. And, it measures ambient noise, in all directions, but by wind speed. But if you got it coming from one side, there's a house that got a report yesterday who was doing analysis and found that actually the complaints they were filing were from two different directions. And it was because they're literally surrounded. So there's problems there. They don't consider anything but ambient noise, audible noise. The microphone specified are at 20 hertz, and the things that are causing the vibrations and so on are down at below 20 hertz, and one of the worst ones are below 1 hertz. So they're completely ignoring the problems. And there's no way in the Part D process for the resident to link into it and say, I got a problem, what's going on? It just sort of happens. Okay, that's the background. If you want to move on to the next slide. What I'm suggesting, and what the suggestion coming from multi-municipal, is that you ask the Minister of the Environment to come talk to you, what's going on. So, a list of questions. I would start by asking for them to outline the complaint process and how they think it works. I've given you what I've read in the documents. Ask them. And then focus first on the audible noise, and I'm giving you a series of questions because you need to pin them down, otherwise they will skirt around the issue. So, noise complaints, the issues are locations versus incidents. What actions have they taken? So, what testing have they done? What has the wind company done? What changes have been made? How many on-site investigations? What we're finding is it's very spotty, and I have no idea. Some people who complain get them there with a handheld noise meter. Others don't. Very few get the Part C protocol. So what exactly have they done in response, the ministry, to these complaints? And then the real important question is, the definition is, how many incidents have you where the cause has been identified and addressed, preventing a similar future occurrence? That's the requirement. How many times is it done? And, how many, and they say, well, we got all these are resolved. Well, how many have actually had that resolution confirmed with the person who made the complaint? One of the two that I mentioned was the spokesman for the wind industry reported back that the resident was really happy with the trees that they planted. Okay, but nothing from the actual resident. Next slide. So then look at other complaints. And so you've got the vibration things we've been talking about. I haven't spent, and health impacts, because the ministry is responsible for the health issues. And according to the Environmental Protection Act, at least. Though what we saw in the incident reports was they were, talk to the public health unit, talk to your doctor. If you got a serious problem, go into the emergency ward. They were just ducking the issue. And shadow flicker, I don't know if it's a problem here, and because it's, again, something that can be followed up on. Very inconsistent reports on those. And so what complaints have they got? What actions have they taken? And then the compliance audit, what is the status? Can you get a copy of the test results? The answer may be no. You have to file a Freedom of Information request, but I think it costs about $25 plus whatever the number of pages, and the reports are probably about 30 pages. So it's not a big cost. And if it's not complete, what action is the ministry taking to make sure it gets completed? Having these things continue operating without compliance is, I think, a problem. So the final slide. So in summary, I guess we're suggesting that you ask questions because it sends an important message to the residents who feel abandoned. To the ministry, somebody's watching this process, and to the wind company. Now, you may have to continue to follow up. I would certainly recommend that you get an advanced copy of the presentation. I was surprised I didn't have to submit mine before, really today, because I think you may want to read it so you're prepared to ask meaningful questions. And it may generate follow-up questions and follow-up meetings. And you may have to escalate above the local district office. There's a group called the Environment Approvals Access and Service Integration Branch, which is manipulating this process or controlling this process behind the scenes, based in Queen's Park. And that's where the real power is. And if the district office can't answer your question satisfactorily, ask for somebody who can. So that's the presentation. Are there questions?
Thank you very much, Warren, and I imagine that there will be a couple, so I'm going to start with Councillor Lawrence. Carol.
I don't have a question, but just in answer to your statement, you don't know if any of our people have complained. They have complained many, many, many times, and as far as I know, they haven't had any response. We were in touch with them when we were asked to find out if any of them had actually complained to the minister, not the ministry, and came out at that time. I mean, they've complained and complained, and it gets to the point that they kind of give up, which is a shame.
Exactly what I was
Yeah.
talking about, yeah.
And I'm sure we have shadow flicker and all those same problems that everybody else does.
Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Howard? So I'm going to paraphrase here a bit, Warren. Basically, what you're seeing out there is just as what Carol has said.
Yeah, her
You
report's
hit a
fully-
stone wall, so how many, continuing being insanity, just keep throwing a stone against it, and you think something else is going to happen. It's more for the municipality in support of residents to continue, each day or each week. Is it a generic letter that you have that, boom, send the email today, get up every morning, and instead of going to your favorite website, go to your email and send another one off to the ministry and
Yeah,
continue on
actually,
with that?
we have circulated a generic complaint, because many people were thinking that they had to be creative and each one had to be unique, and going, no, just here's the information, but, just describe the noise and be as specific possible. So I actually have some copies of that if anybody's interested, but it's keep complaining.
Okay. Councillor Cutting. Beth?
I was under the understanding, though, that when you issued a complaint, or a resident issued a complaint, that they would come back and ask for, am I right, Marion? They would ask for time of day, so to send in a generic complaint, you're going to get back the work that they should be doing.
Well, but if you can provide the information, in fact, the people I'm working with in K2, we've actually had them specifically talk about wind speed in meters per second. And that's how guys, your protocol doesn't test the problem.
And also, those handhelds that the people came out to the property with, Warren, are they reasonably priced that a resident could purchase a handheld and have a little more, information that they can't really argue with if you could document it the same way they're documenting it? Is that?
Yes and no. Well, there is a testing technology being developed by some people in New Zealand, which I think is certified for Canada. But the problem is you need expertise. So you go in and say, well, first of all, you have to, what do you do? Verify the machine is giving a proper reading. And so that's, test number one. And test number two, you really need to have some experience in testing. Otherwise, they'll say it's garbage. So we're not recommending that they go out and buy these. If you get into a testing situation under Part D, we are suggesting you hire a qualified acoustician, and there's at least one person that can do this, and do parallel testing. But, that will keep them honest.
That goes back to the onus through the whole process. Of course, that goes back to the onus that is put back on the homeowner
Yes.
to prove. And I'm wondering, has anybody read or looked at next year's website, Marion, maybe you, to see if they have posted the results? I haven't either, but it said here April 2016, and we know that because the last community liaison group meeting that we had, they said that it was going to be done by April, but I must confess I have not gone on to see if it's, we asked for a full study, remember, at that community liaison, they said no. And I said, well, we'll have to go through the freedom of information because it's got to be it's got to be a public information. It's just, and their excuse was as well, you wouldn't understand. Well, you know what, we can get somebody who would.
Yes.
And anyways, yeah.
So we're encouraging everyone to file freedom of information requests for
Yeah.
the audit reports. The requirement is only after April 2017 to post it. And there was one in Eastern Ontario, the South Branch, which is the Cornwall office, we were following up, and they admitted, oh, are there new regulations? I haven't read them. I mean, that's the level of understanding. I mean, it's appalling. So, but I think they've got themselves in a corner because of the renewable energy approval requirements. I mean, those are pretty specific. And at what point, not responding to them, does the company become non-compliant with their approval?
Of course, and you know, the issue is that the government is just glossing over because they want these things to go through. They're still, you know, doing approvals for them. So to actually get the government to step in and say, we want you to be compliant and we want you to do this for our residents, I mean, that has not happened in the last 10, 15 years while this has all been going on. So why do we think it would happen now? It's still going to go back to the onus of municipal councils who have these projects, and it's going to go back to the onus of the residents who are continuing to fight them.
Well, I guess I don't know if you saw the coverage about 2 weeks ago on the K2, the Straturas. And it had got so bad with them. I mean, they're continually filing complaints. They're writing to the minister regularly. And they were not even getting incident numbers reported back, which is the requirement. CTV phoned the ministry asking for an update. That afternoon, they got 20 incident numbers. I mean, they're afraid of a spotlight being shone on this. I mean, otherwise, you were being polite. Having read the incident reports, I can't say anything but cover up.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
It has been from the very beginning.
We'll go to Mr. Bell then. John?
Thanks very much, Warren, for your presentation. Two little things. The key group here, the Environmental Approvals Access and Service Integration Branch, have you had dealings with them as a multi-municipal wind turbine group?
No.
Have dealings with them? Or
No.
is there a specific person that you contact in that branch that
I
is
would-
familiar with the project, I guess?
I would start locally.
Okay.
And if you want to escalate, if you go into the Ontario Staff Directory, if you Google Ontario Staff Directory Ministry, you'll quickly find that branch and you'll find the head person in it. I can do that for you
Okay.
if you want that. We have not, but they're the people sort of behind the scenes where everything stalls and is being controlled.
Right. And the other thing I just want to comment, there's been a lot of noise, noise isn't the right word, publicity over the new, well, I guess they go hand in hand, over the new project in Chatham-Kent, whereby that got, shall we say, stalled and then it got going again. Can you comment on that, and just from the aspect of, I guess, the public and recognizing there are significant wells, I think, that are being contaminated from what I read anyways?
This is bizarre. But the classic example of what's going on, it's a very good question. I'm not directly involved with that, but I'm following it closely. My understanding is that as of this moment, there are 13 wells that are contaminated by the project. The position of the wind company is it's because the wells are old and failing. Coincidentally, 13 failed at the same time as the project's being built. The ministry's position is that it's a responsibility of the residents to prove the health hazard. You got to go higher, and do the testing of the water. I mean, it's black. I mean, you've seen pictures of it. And in some sense, the black water is an easier visual than the noise problems that everybody else is dealing with. They did with some First Nations people, started blockading the access to the sites to stop it. The company went for an injunction, and the court hearing on that, which was about 2 or 3 weeks ago, the hearing on the injunction itself, the judge they worked out an agreement. They would back off blocking sites, and they would, the company would stop building until they had a court hearing, which I think took place on Thursday. And the decision comes out today But the questions from the judge were quite interesting, because he said, well, can you explain what these blockades have been doing? Well, it's threatening the health of our workers. Well, can you explain exactly what these people standing at the side of the road and how they are threatening your workers? And I don't think they had a good example. And the judge, I think, in conclusion said, my job is not to block dissent. So we're kind of hopeful that something comes out of this. But I mean, not right next door. This is north. That one's south of Wallaceburg. North of Wallaceburg is the Otter Creek project. It's proceeding through the process. Exactly the same shale conditions. So it's like this is the third project that's been impacted, and so it's going to be interesting to see where that comes out. But I mean, it's typical of the ministry's response. Not our problem. You've got to prove it, and that's not what's stated in the act. And so I think there's the other thing that's happening. It's in Eastern Ontario. There's a group there that has a retired lawyer working more than full time, filing a judicial review, charging the ministry of institutional bias. They're not doing their job. And that's coming together. It's a long shot, but it's not costing much because the lawyer's doing it all for free. And there's a lot of information being collected. So, I mean, every one of these examples goes into that hopper. He's filing affidavit after affidavit.
Very good. Any other questions at this point in time? Warren, on behalf of not only the Council of West Grey, but I think I speak on behalf of the residents of West Grey. Thank you for your tireless efforts. I've heard from a part-time West Grey resident that has a cottage up here that I think you know very well from down in the Listowel area.
I was encouraged.
That he's told me on a number of occasions how much time and effort and work pro bono that you've put into this and made it a passion for the safety of your community and of the community as a whole in Ontario. So again, thank you very much. Thanks for the update. Thank you for the information that's given to us and how we can respond going forward to address the issues not only from our own personal here in the East Durham Wind Project, but the wind projects across Ontario to get some clarity on the cumbrous bureaucratic nightmare that's been created by wind turbine development.
Thanks very much for the time.
Okay, thank you very much, Warren. Okay. Mark has left me. Hi. Do you want to take just a couple of minute break? I think Mark went to get Carrie is on the finance, so we can causes a bit of a problem with we'll leave that up, Brent. So we'll take a couple of minutes here until Carrie comes back and call the meeting back to order. Short little coffee break. We're down to staff reports. And first one is the finance treasurer, the director, Carrie.
Just before we go there, if we could, back to the presentation, Warren just gave me the template to send in the complaints, for people to fill out. So I will give these to Mark, and they would be available here, and perhaps we could get one that they could copy to our people that are impacted by the turbines out in Glen Elk.
Is that loose net group still?
Yeah, I think
Kind of loose?
Well, we did reach them through when we were looking if any of them had complained directly to the minister, and were able to reach them. So.
Yeah.
But anyway,
Okay.
it's here, and I'll give it to Mark.
Very good. Yes. Thank you. Okay. Carrie, We have your report. And the motion I have, I'm going to introduce it. And if there's any questions on the voucher, I have a motion moved by John A. Bell, seconded by Rob Thompson. Be it resolved that the Director of Finance Treasurer be authorized to pay the accounts presented as voucher number 18, 2017 of the Municipality of West Grey in the amount of $446,694.01. Questions, comments? Rebecca? Councillor Herget.
Yes, Carrie, on page 64, there's repairs to 185 Garifraxa Street due to damage from snow removal. Can you explain that one, please?
Probably Brent.
Brent,
You got
okay.
that?
Councillor Hergert, there was a incident last year by accident that the snow clearing operations on the main street in Garifraxa Street, there was a hidden step that was buried with snow. The loader bucket dislodged the step and shoved it into the building and causing that type of stucco. It's a blue-sided building, has a stucco finish. Our insurance, of course, our deductible is a lot higher than the claim, so it was just, I went ahead and had the repairs completed to the building.
Okay, so possibly to you as well, Brent, sewer for Newstat. This is page 66. The Durahoist adjustable mast and brackets, $1,644. And I believe that I saw that for Newstat and Durham. Newstat water, sewer. 66. And each amount is for $1,644.86.
That is related to health and safety. It's equipment, or it's a hoist to have people are harnessed, I believe. If I'm reading it right, I know I gave permission for them to have retrieval apparatus, like to be properly to go down into a manhole. They physically have to be tied off to a winching type system so that the person above can actually pull the gentleman or whoever out of the bottom in case they suddenly become overcome by gas and things like that. So that person hasn't got to go back into the down into the manhole. So that's, I think it's a retrieval type system for so the person going down to doing the inspection is tethered off to a fall arrest type system, and then the person up top stays there and keeps.
Is this a new requirement, or
No,
this is new equipment?
This is just something that we needed to come up to make sure that we're up to code.
Compliant, okay.
It's just becoming compliant with the regulations that have been in place for some time.
Okay, and my final question then is on page 69 at the very bottom, Cedarwell Excavating, EC King Contracting, Upper Canada Stretchers for the Durham soccer field sign. I was curious how that worked. Does the money come, like we pay it and then the soccer club reimburses us? Okay, and then was that design approved? I know that they had come in and asked us for the first design, but just curious, I don't recall them coming back in for the second design phase there.
I met with that gentleman, Randy, is it? I met with that gentleman and told him that his idea was to build a long or a high brick wall. I said if you can set it into the bank and just use one layer of bricks along the bottom and then use a landscape pattern of cedar trees that go around the back as a backdrop instead of the wall, then the sign stands out in front of the trees. There's no risk to any people, and I believe he took that. That's what he did in that regard. I haven't seen it yet, but I believe I told him that's the that's the least risk to municipality It's just one level of bricks with the cedar trees along the back drop, so the sign stands out in front of the green cedars. It's still going in the same area, but it's not really set back into the bank. It's just set back one row in a U-shaped pattern, and the sign's out in front with the cedar trees along as the backdrop. And 2 feet is the highest level that you can use without going, before you go to a railing type system. Okay?
Okay, any further questions? Councillor Cuddy. Beth?
Just to get back to the step situation where the sidewalk snowplow took out, is it not the responsibility of the residents to have their steps cleared in that situation so that the snowplow operator can see where the steps are? Or do we not have anything in place that says, you know, if there's so much snow, you have to clear this so we can see where things are?
Good point, Councillor Cutting. One of the things that is very apparent on on Garifaxa Street is the height of entry from the sidewalk into the businesses. Most of them have fixed concrete steps. This one, I believe, was just sitting on grade or on our sidewalk. Wasn't attached, wasn't fixed, and that's what caused the problem. You may be correct. I think it's just the fact that we're trying to do sidewalk clearing efforts, and again, it's just an incident that happened.
Yeah, and I understand that, but maybe at some point soon, since winter's coming, we should be looking at some sort of, a bylaw that insists that people have their steps cleared so that when our sidewalk plow goes down, that we can see. I mean, it's really, I understand it's a real problem on that street because it's, everybody has to have a step to get in, right? But
Yeah. One of the problems is our sidewalk clearing machines are on that street early in the morning, and those people aren't able to clear their sidewalks. Like, they would have to be out at 3 or 4 in the morning to...
well, then what about just making sure that our plows are over as opposed to, and let them clear the little spot by their residence or their, place of business, and just keep the plows over closer to the poles? I don't know, it just seems, could happen many times. I mean, it's happened once, but it could happen.
If I can offer, sorry, Councilor Lawrence, if I can offer, one of the things that I was hoping to do, and again, we did apply for OSIF last week for Garifaxa Street. If we are successful, one of the things I'd like to do is take a look at Garifaxa Street as a whole and look at the business community and see if we can't afford to raise the elevation of the side. We're not going to get everybody, but is there a common ground that we can come to that would help benefit accessibility into a lot of the business community? So that's going to be definitely looked at, and that might eliminate that one, that one step from by raising the street up 6 inches or whatever we can do, that the maximum that we can lift it up, it might take care of quite a few of those situations. Yeah.
Carol?
Well, I just want to ask, in the case where you're talking to, would those steps not be extended out onto municipal property where they got hit?
You're correct. The building faces on the main street in Garifax are a property line. So those buildings, most of them are built property line to property line. There are steps that do encroach onto...
Well, this particular one,
Yeah,
it would have encroached, wouldn't it?
yeah, yes.
Yeah, so it's something, I hope your plan works, but if it doesn't, we should have something in place, because if it's municipal property, and then it's costing municipality to repair it, it's got to be, like, maybe the cost goes to the, or half the cost or something goes to the homeowner.
I may go back, I'll talk to Steve, but go back to the property owner and say that their step has to be fixed,
Yeah.
attached.
Something.
It can't be loose. It's got to be somehow fastened.
Yeah,
And then that would eliminate that problem.
Yeah.
Or at least maybe reduce the potential
yeah.
of something happening there.
And I know they're out there early, but maybe we do have to have something in place that those steps that are encroaching on municipal property need to be cleaned, have to be cleaned, or we won't take responsibility for damage, something like that. We could,
Maybe you just need a little flashing light or a little gnome or something of that, a marker. Might be something that could be a policy to be added in. Rebecca?
Just going to suggest that in light of us possibly paying for this expenditure, maybe we should also be looking at an encroachment agreement with that party for those specific steps in the event we have to rebuild it again, or they have to rebuild it again, that we get something registered on title so it keeps going with any owner.
Actually, you kind of took the words out of what I was thinking of. I was actually going to have Steve do a study of the downtown community and look at what businesses do have encroachment out onto our sidewalk and let them know that municipality is not responsible if there's any damage that's caused to those steps and adjacent, if that does result in damaging a building because those steps encroach out onto our, we've sort of, we should have an understanding with the business owner, and I'm not looking at hardship, but an understanding that our liability will not cover their stairs or anything like that.
Okay, good thorough discussion, and should be able to find some resolve that is not onerous on any one party. Okay, any other questions on the accounts? Look forward, I think the biggest question there is, Rebecca, most of your questions were answered, and then we'll look for on the steps, approaches or entrance to businesses on Garifraxa, of follow-up from Steve and Brent on that. Anything further? I've read the motion introduced, call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. Okay. Anything else, Carrie, other than timesheets you may want to talk about?
Time sheets, please.
Okay.
Another month has gone by.
It is the start of the month, and okay. Any other questions for Carrie at this point in time? Carrie, on behalf of the municipality and council, I know that a number of council condolences and best wishes going forward on the passing of your father last week. And best moving forward with that. Our sympathies. Okay. All right. Brent, we'll go down to infrastructure and public works. And the first one is the maintenance tender for winter maintenance. Step forward into that one. Any comments, Brent, other than what we've got here?
I introduced this back at the committee of the whole meeting and just bringing it forward for formal, what's the word? The word's eluding me. Approval of the two submissions that we received.
Okay. I have a motion moved by R. Herget, seconded by Bev Cutting. Be it resolved that the Council and Municipality of West Grey hereby awards tender WG 1723 for contracted winter maintenance parts A, B, and C to Botanical Designs, and parts F and H be awarded to S&E Lawn Care and Snow Removal for the unit prices per call-out submitted in tender plus HST. Questions? Councillor Lawrence, yes?
There seems to be no bid for 8, and what are you doing in 8?
If you recall, Councillor Lawrence, back at Committee of the Whole meeting, Council gave me authorization to proceed with trying to negotiate with the...
So this is not the final, then you're moving
No,
on?
no, no, no,
Okay.
no. This is just so I can get
This one started.
these parts
Yeah.
awarded to these two companies.
Okay.
Yeah. If I can bring up also, Councillor Lawrence, I did talk to the supervisors regarding Elmwood. You gave me a question as to the sidewalks in Elmwood. Apparently, we have never cleared the sidewalks in Elmwood on our side. The business community or the banks and things, I believe, are on the Brockton side. I believe Brockton, the whole sidewalk isn't cleared except for the just in front of the bank, and I forget, used to be the store on
Basically
the
the
corner,
post.
but I believe that's no longer.
Basically
in
from the
business.
post office south, I think.
Thank
Yeah.
you, the post office, and yeah,
We don't clear any of the side streets, one side only.
no.
I would have thought we kept I know it's not necessary now, but the library was on our side.
Yeah. Which leads me, if I can quickly add, I'd like to do a sidewalk review. We don't really have, minimum maintenance standards covers roads and a bunch of other things. It doesn't have a minimum maintenance, does not cover sidewalks, only with respect to tripping hazards. It doesn't cover it with respect to winter, snow, ice removal, and things like that. I'd like to review that and look at sidewalks in our communities and come back to council and find out what is council's desire as to moving forward as to, for example, like Elmwood, is there any wherewithal to increase service to some of the communities or leave things as status quo? But more importantly is have a sidewalk policy that protects the municipality moving forward that is also accepted by our insurer. I'd like to make sure Cowan's agree to our policy, so it, like we don't have anything. So we're, and a lot of communities do have policy regarding sidewalk maintenance. How much snow do you allow to accumulate before they're treated and that sort of thing. So I'd like to come back, hopefully I'd like to get it completed by November, that we have a policy that council endorses, but also our insurance company also endorses.
Rebecca, sorry.
I like that idea. I think it's fantastic. I would like we're gonna have what are we gonna have? Roads first? Road study?
Bridge.
Bridge study prior to the sidewalk. But I think it's great to reach out to the insurance and check around, make sure we're good there.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Anything else on winter maintenance? Introduced. Call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. So we will look for Brent bringing something further back for D, E, and G, I think. I've got it right. Yep. So we've got a lot of it covered off. The next one is our ultraviolet on the wastewater treatment center. It was a recommendation from the ministry to have, if I'm correct, and Brent, before we introduce the motion, any further information you want to speak to?
I just want to confirm that the, as you can see in my report, that there's a number of municipalities that are using single sourcing or using one particular brand of the ultraviolet system. In keeping with that, the engineer is strongly recommending that we continue with or have the same provider for our new system that we, as I said, we currently have funding for. And I'd like to get that going, get approval only because it's going to take a few months before that system can be built, and it leads forward into us tendering the contracted portion of the work. So I'm trying to get council's approval to entertain approving H2 flow or Trojan system for the Durham Waterworks facility.
Okay. I have a motion moved by Rob Thompson, second by John A. Bell. Be it resolved that the Council of the Municipality of West Grey hereby approves H2 Flow as the provider for the new ultraviolet wastewater treatment system for the Durham wastewater treatment plant at an approximate cost of $90,000 plus HST, to be fully funded from the Clean Water and Wastewater Fund, CWWF. Any further questions on this? Rebecca?
So am I understanding that the cost of it is $90,000 and we received $140,000 from the wastewater fund?
That was our portion that we were provided funding for, but over and above the 90,000, that's just for the material. Now there's some modifications that have to be completed to our water treatment plant. It's going to involve tendering it out to a contractor. Contractor will install this system. So it's going to, I believe back in earlier on this year in March, I think I provided a approximate cost, and it was going to be based on the engineer's estimate, was approximately 230,000, I believe, 230 to 240,000 for the completion of the install of this system, including the capital cost of the equipment.
So 230 minus our 90,000 we're going to put in today, subtract the 145, and then the remaining part will still be funded by the Durham
Users,
users,
yes,
right?
yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions on this? Call the question then. All those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. Here, Mark. And the next one, Brent, I kind of indicated a little bit of this earlier in my comments, but Mr. McKnight has submitted his retirement notice.
Yes.
Is it really that scary that it would happen on Halloween? Or
Yes, Your Worship. Mr. McKnight approached me approximately 2 weeks ago and advised, well, actually, it was more than that. It was approximately 3 weeks ago. Regardless, Harold came in and talked to me and indicated that he is wishing to step down. And in doing so, as my report says, he's got over 50 years service in the agricultural drainage industry, and I believe started in West Grey in 2005 or 2006, I believe, somewhere in there. Regardless, Harold's going to leave some large shoes to fill. His knowledge and his skill, understanding the legislation or the Agricultural Drainage Act. His expertise is going to be greatly missed. And I'm looking at what council's desires are moving forward. After that, I think we're going to have to replace him with somebody, whether contracted service or a full-time person that can be shared amongst 2 other municipalities, which was currently being in the current capacity. I think Brockton, we shared Mr. McKnight with Brockton, and it worked out very well. I don't think there was any issues over the last 12 or so years that Harold has been with us. West Grey currently has about approximately 20, and I could be off 1 or 2, but approximately 20 municipal drains. We're not over abundant or, that we need a full-time person. It's definitely not, the work isn't there, the workload isn't there, but we will have to require some means of taking care of our municipal our drains moving forward. So in a part-time capacity or a contracted position, then on an as-need basis is something I'm suggesting to council.
Very good. We'll let you, falls under under your department, so we'll look forward to what the solution may be to replace Harold. As you said, maybe going forward, maybe it's artificial intelligence that we need, because Harold did have 50 years of background experience there. But, I think he's given you some recommendations as well, too, of where he sees that
That is correct.
program and aspect going forward. So we
Yeah.
look forward to that. And yes, very valuable and conscientious individual has done no harm, certainly, to the municipality, and great work to all the community that he's worked with out there on resolving water issues. Okay. I think that's it, unless there's anything else. I guess the only other thing in there is information on the connecting link on Highway 6 from IMOS. Any other?
Yeah, that was to be excluded from this agenda. It was written initially in there and I missed taking a page out. It'll come back to the next meeting by bylaw.
Yeah.
Which that's been approved in the past through a bylaw.
Okay. So it's just in there for information at this point in time. Pretty good agreement. We can't, the liability on that Durham Hill and whatnot, let somebody else take keeping that clean on Highway 6. Look forward to that coming back, Mark. Bev, comment?
Yeah, Brenda received a letter from Bob Kelly and a phone call, and I believe you met with him on Concession 6 in Glenelg Township.
I'm sorry, the name?
Bob Kelly, Robert Kelly, on Concession 6. He lives between Edge Hill,
Oh.
Edge Hill School and
Yes,
the,
you were CC'd on the letter, I saw that.
well, he's called me because he's around the corner sort of thing. What do you see as a solution to that, or do we need a solution, or is it, what do you?
I shared the letter with the road supervisor, and he was baffled as to the letter about the degree of what the gentleman was speaking of. According to the road supervisor, he indicated to me that that road was not in that bad a shape. Like the wording that was put in the letter was very strong.
Yeah, well,
And-
I wondered if, and when I spoke to him, I wondered if it was the rain. It was such a wet season. I know that there has been, a certain amount of what he's saying is like a slurry kind of product that it turns into when it gets very wet. And I know some of that area can be a little bit, wet. It's sort of, but I don't know whether it was, I didn't drive it at the time when he was saying it was as wet, because one time he spoke to me, it was dried out more, so.
Yeah. The only time that it would become, like the word you use, slurry, is right after a grading. If it was right after a grading and then it rained,
Yes.
then it becomes slurry.
Right.
The roads, in my opinion, from what I've driven on this year, and a lot of you live out in the rural area, would know that a lot of our roads didn't really misbehave that much, even though with the deluge of rain that we got, it wasn't more potholes, it was washouts along the side of the road that were causing us more grief this past year than ever. But, in speaking with the road supervisor, he did acknowledge that that road was on the books, or in his mind, not on the books, but he was thinking of maintenance program next year of applying gravel.
Okay.
It's been quite a few years
Yeah.
since it's seen maintenance gravel, so he was, that was one section that he was going to put maintenance gravel on it.
So could Tim, you're talking about Tim, or?
Yes, yeah.
Could you ask Tim to call Bob and let him know that, just because he's gone around to a number of the neighbors, and I think it would be pertinent that he know that that's sort of the course of action that's going to be taken?
I was going to say I was going to send him a letter back.
Okay, perfect.
I think it would be better coming from
Yep.
myself.
No, that's good. And just
and,
state what's going to happen, and hopefully that will,
Mm-hmm.
because he's been there 20 years, never had an issue with it. It was just this year, and I really put it down to the wetness of the year. And
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to say I think Mr. Kelly's going to be responded to and with that information. Okay,
Yeah.
all right. Can move on. Any other questions for Brent? At this point in time? Okay, thank you very much for the report, Brent. Clerk's report. Mark? First one is on the Grey County Planning and Development Department. Looking for a minor exemption or thoughts? Go ahead.
Yes, the county does have a tree cutting bylaw, and Marvin Burkhart, owner of lands on Lot 16, Concession 11 in Glenelg, has requested a minor exemption for woodland clearing. The tree cutting bylaw speaks to a certain area of forested areas, if it may need approval from the county, or certain size or type of trees, and perhaps it may even be in the significant woodland constraints. So Mr. Burkhart has requested an exemption from that, and the county is seeking any comments from the municipality. And if there are no objections, I do have a resolution for council if there aren't any objections. The purpose is for to facilitate his farming operation, provide more farming lands for farming.
I believe it's cash crop. I don't know, yeah. And the price of expansion, so he's going to gain 5 or 6 acres. Maybe a little bit more than that. Or a little, yeah. And that's just a guesstimate on taking a look at the picture there of the parcel of land. Any other comments? If not, we'd entertain a resolution to receive for information and send on to the county that there's no concern. It would be covered off in their, in the county, in the overall county tree cutting bylaw. Yep. Okay, thanks, Rebecca. Okay, I have a motion moved by R. Herget, seconded by Carol Lawrence. Be it resolved that the Council of the Municipality of West Grey hereby supports the request from Marvin Burkhart to the County of Grey Planning and Development Department for a minor exemption woodland clearing for his property located at Lot 16, Concession 11, former Township of Glenelg. Any further questions on the motion? Call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. Just as I could, a little further aside to that, I was talking to an individual the other day about the county tree cutting bylaw. The individual had planted trees some 20 to 25 years ago, and he's, starting to look at the fact of harvesting the trees. They were planted as a crop, not as trees, or as natural growth. And now he's trying to figure out the interpretation of the tree cutting bylaw. So are they going to tell me that I can't cut my trees that I planted on my property as a crop? How am I going to get them cut? And so I have spoken to Sarah Johnson, who covers that off at the county, and it's, really it was one that she said hadn't been covered just yet, or kind of thought about. Interesting. She says, "Oh, I think we're going to have to take some thought about that." He said, we can harvest the trees, I can replant them again, the growth will come in another 30, 40, or whatever it is, to harvest it. So anyways,
Does
Carol.
that tree cutting bylaw cover only hardwood, or does it cover?
no, it covers all.
So if somebody had a Christmas tree farm,
Yes.
they couldn't cut the trees. Well, that doesn't make any sense at all, does it?
And as Sarah said, it's an interpretation. She said it really hasn't come tested to us in that context. So, there's a lot of conservation planting, been encouraged and whatnot, and how much of that has been just to replant, and how much has been, well, this is a crop. So interesting as we go forward. So just as an aside, my apologies for deviating. Okay, Mark, the next one you have is coincidentally from the Multi-Municipal Wind Turbine Working Group, concerning support or letter to the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change on something that was brought out when Mr. Howard was here. I think Deputy Mayor Bell spoke about it, was the North Kent Wind Project. So I do have the motion moved by Rob Thompson, seconded by John A. Bell. Be it resolved that the Council of the Municipality of West Grey hereby supports the request by the Multi-Municipal Wind Turbine Working Group requesting the Minister of Environment and Climate Change to remedy the concerns of the citizens of North Kent and the First Nations clans regarding the alleged contamination of drinking wells by the Samsung Renewable Energy 36 turbine development known as the North Kent Wind Project.
Where is that going? I mean, it should go to the ministry.
I think, yes, requesting the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change would go directly, and Mark is saying CC to the
Multi-municipal.
wind. Anyone else that we think,
Well, maybe.
media outlets?
Probably our own MPP. And MP, if it's affecting First Nations, that's
Nations.
federal, so maybe it should go to our MP as well.
MP and MPP.
Yeah.
You include those as well, Mark? Okay. Any other questions or comments on the motion? Call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. Thank you. Any other questions, Mark? Or comments, Mark? Any questions for Mark at this point in time? Okay, seeing none. We're down to bylaws, I believe, Mark. And we have, if I'm not mistaken, 3. Starting with bylaw number 93. Okay, I got the middle one. Excuse me. The first one is to establish the fees and charges for certain services. I have a motion moved by Carol Lawrence, seconded by R. Hergut. Be it resolved that bylaw number 93, 2017, being a bylaw to further amend bylaw number 50, 2014, being a bylaw to establish fees and charges for certain services, be now read a first, second, and third time, passed and numbered, and that the said bylaw be signed by the mayor and the clerk, sealed with the seal of the corporation, and be engrossed in the bylaw book. Is there any questions or comments on this? Rebecca?
Is
Is this the same bylaw that changes the dollar figure on the ice time?
It forms part of, there's a number of schedules to the fees and charges bylaw but this is an additional item within that bylaw as amended. Yeah.
Yeah. I would say that that's usually done through the budget process, and so we can fit that in, and we'll look at it at that point. I know there are some recommended from, obviously, our conversations at Committee of the Whole, so we'll establish, once council's given direction, and we can bring that forward. Okay, Carol?
Well, I think the other thing, Mr. Mayor, is that, like, it would be put in place for the next season, because season has already started,
Right.
you know, so, yeah.
Yeah, that's relating to ice rentals. There's
Yeah, the
quite a
ice
few other
rentals.
ones out there as
Yeah.
well, too, that we'll look at going forward. Okay? Any other questions on the bylaw, number 93? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. Very good. Bylaw number 94 is a bylaw to appoint citizens to committees. I have a motion moved by John A. Bell, seconded by Rob Thompson. Be it resolved that bylaw number 94, 2017, being a bylaw to appoint officials and citizens to various committees, be now read a first, second, and third time, passed and numbered, and that the said bylaw be signed by the mayor and the clerk, sealed with the seal of the corporation, and be engrossed in the bylaw book. Any further questions or comments? Councillor Lawrence. Carol?
Just a small typo under Newstead, Rio Machina. It's Machin. Machina. Yeah.
Okay. So we'll put this, the mover and seconder, then the motion will be as amended. Very good.
Sorry, just to be sure, Mark, you take, it's moving the I, because it's just an A at the end.
Yeah.
You just have it in the wrong place.
Okay, correcting the spelling on that. Any further questions, comments? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. And the last bylaw is confirming the proceedings. I have a motion moved by R. Hergert, seconded by Bev Cutting. Be it resolved that bylaw number 95, 2017, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the October 2nd, 2017 council meeting, be now read a first, second, and third time, passed and numbered, and that the said bylaw be signed by the mayor and the clerk, sealed with the seal of the corporation, be engrossed in the bylaw book. Any comments on this motion? Call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. Very good. New business. Councillor Cutting.
I'm wondering, related to this presentation we had this morning, if there is interest to actually go onto the NextEra website and the MOE website and just see if there is any kind of reports done for our noise studies that were supposed to be posted in April. And if I may, Marion, it was April that they were saying that it was going to be the first one, like the first section or something, and then it was going to be concluded in the fall, or do you recall? Okay. So my question is if we do have, if we could go on the website and just see what kind of information there is, and if there's not enough information and it's requested that we get it all, could we file a Freedom of Information? I really believe that this whole process, and having been through it for a number of years, is hugely flawed. It's not open and transparent, as they say. It's completely one-sided as far as the residents having to prove everything that they say, as opposed to the other way around, even though the MOECC is, one of our ministries. It is on the side of the turbine companies, and so it makes it very difficult for residents to actually file a complaint and get not difficult to file the complaint, but file the complaint and get some sort of resolve or answer. So my question is can we do some research into see what has been posted on both the MOEE and the Eastern Wind Turbine website? And if there is not enough information, could we file a Freedom of Information request?
Could I suggest, I think that's a good thing to look through some of that information and whatnot. With our staffing, I'm not sure that we have the staff available. Is that a possibility that you could look after some of that, Bev?
Yeah, I certainly
And
don't mind. It won't be this week or I booked right up until,
Yep.
the middle of the week after Thanksgiving. But certainly after that, I would be glad to come in and
And I think, just to put back through, there may be some people out in the community, that community loose net group that I spoke about might be able to help us out because it's more focused on them. The other aspect was, I know Mr. Howard seems to have a lot of probably websites bookmarked that he's already found on Google. You might want to contact him and just use his
into that
resources as well too. So
in
I'm
the
going to
next
leave it.
week or two.
I'm going to leave it with you, and you can either bring it back at committee of the whole and/or a future council meeting. Thanks, Bev. Carol.
Further to that and to Warren's presentation, and maybe through what Bev and if Marion's helping her, I wonder if we should be meeting with that kind of loose-knit group with regard to their complaints, because I know they put in a number of complaints, and pursue what he was suggesting, have the local MOECC here, and start there, and at least, find out from them, have they complained? Well, we know that, but confirm that, and how often have they had any response? And I think we should pursue that. If municipalities don't keep pushing, it's going to go on and on. Like they've just approved more contracts, for heaven's sake. So it's not going to stop unless there's enough issue raised about it. So maybe we could pursue that as well, Mr. Mayor. And as I'm saying, throughout the work you're doing, and maybe be in touch with Sue's T, or somebody out there, or Maria, because I think they have they're enough back and forth. They know whether they've put in complaints and whether they've had. I think the only complaint that ever got any action was the trees that got planted on. Who was that? Sue's T? Or yeah. That's about the only action there's ever been to complaints, so probably we should try to pursue that. Not immediately, but...
I'm wondering if, and I don't want to delegate off too much, but Carol, whether you can, because we kind of heard this morning already how much that group is kind of loose net. Is there some interest or being able to generate before we start setting up meetings and everybody, just I'll leave it with yourself and Bev, who've probably had the most involvement there, of doing a little background information and updating with the group and finding out the concerns. I do believe there probably is a fair number of concerns out there, but right at the present moment, before we set up a working group and go through and everything may be just very nice out there.
That's what I'm suggesting, is that we need to talk to them. And
Yeah.
my feeling is they've just given up, and they're living with it, but let's find out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so I'll leave it, give direction to do a bit of research on where the grouping is, and the other factor might be on how many people have sold and moved out. Have just sold their properties and moved away. I know some people that have done that as well too, and get some of their feedback. And Because it's not only going to take the municipality as a council, but to be forceful, you're going to need the citizens themselves behind you. So, as I said, I would endeavor that yourself and Bev kind of get the feeling out there, whether there's that
Well, I think the thing
motivation
is,
for fight.
yeah, the thing is, we would be doing it on behalf of those people, you know,
Yep.
like doing it as a council, but we're doing it on behalf of those who have that, who
Absolutely.
have the issues.
Yep. Okay. Any other new business? Mr. Bell? John?
Mr. Mayor, thank you very much. At this time, I would like to announce that I would like to have council support in the endeavor of pursuing the position of warden of Grey County for the year 2018. I do have the support of my wife and blessing, I might say, and the support of my 3 grown children, and my son-in-law and my grandson even give me a little when I asked him. So I would ask for your support in pursuing that endeavor and look forward to it. So thank you.
Thanks for that update, Mr. Bell. Is there anything else you want to update at this point in time on what happens at what happened in last county council meeting?
As far as
Long-term care?
No, there was a closed session, but I can tell you nobody walked out. So if you've got that information, long-term care, proceeding forward, the process of finding a management company to help us with the policies and to help with the development of Rockwood Terrace as a 166-bed facility here in and around, or in Durham, on the municipal services of Durham. That probably was the biggest aspect of it. There's a few things surrounding public works, pretty much everything else. A couple of planning aspects from the county perspective in the Blue Mountains, a large red line revision project for in and around Montera Golf course, and the other one would be certainly of interest is the continuing development process for what is known as the Flattle project in Dundalk. 800 units proposed to go in there. I believe the first phase is about 75. Second phase is in excess of 100. And from what I understand, those 2 phases are fully sold out already. Construction has started. There's a number of foundations have been dug, and some of them are being poured. And in contrast to what building in Grey County is kind of a seasonal, from what we understand, this project will be going forward right through the winter. Instead of the housing development that's usually, as I said, seasonal in Grey County, this project, 800 houses could be, if the infrastructure is improved in Dundalk to facilitate that, if they can meet the requirements there, it could be sold out and completed within 5 years. Large urban residential development has made it to Grey County, not just in Blue Mountains, but it's hitting other spots now as well too. Carol?
Does Dundalk have the capacity, infrastructure capacity for something
No,
like that?
they have the infrastructure for the first 2 phases, and that's what they're working on to complete 3, and I think it's 4 phases, 3 and 4. They're going to need upgrades, not as much to the sewer capacity, but certainly to their water capacity. They don't have that.
And this is the gentleman that made the large donation to Markdale Hospital, is it not? And also to the school project in Markdale?
I'm not sure whether it's as much
I
to
thought that was
the,
the same man.
I don't think it's to the school project. I think there's two different ones there.
Is that
But
the-
he's definitely to the Markdale Hospital
Right.
was the Flato.
So the one to the school, is that the development in Markdale then? The developer?
The developer in Markdale, yes.
Okay.
And I believe that group of developers is out of Collingwood.
The other thing I wanted to ask, I noticed in the paper, although I didn't see anything in the county minutes or committee of the whole minutes, but it seems that there isn't the support out there for electing the warden at large. And did I read it correctly, or did the paper have it correctly, that Blue Mountain turned it down?
Yes, there was a resolution come forward. It takes a 2/3 majority, and I believe that at the present moment, there's 5 municipalities that have voted it down, so it is, it's dead. And yes, the town of the Blue Mountains.
And did they not put it
refused.
forward in the first place?
It was the...
Or Mr. McKean, anyway?
It was the mayor of the town of the Blue Mountains that made that approach at Grey County.
Interesting.
Politics always is.
Yes. I do have another thing to bring up, Mr. Mayor. You asked me to discuss with the Normanby Rec with regard to this issue with minor hockey and the difference in rates.
Yes?
And what they're suggesting is that we look at our rates, and for West Grey minor sports, that they have the same rate beginning, same as Durham, that the $95.
Be a flat rate across.
West Grey only.
Yeah.
Minor sports. So we could perhaps look at that when we're working on our
On our budget
fees and
going forward
bylaw.
to
Yeah, it seems
2018.
only fair. I mean, it's, and yet, you know, it does, the summer ice does cost more money, and that's why it goes on, and it's a fair amount of income comes there. But for our own minor sports, which could be figure skating or minor hockey, whatever,
Okay.
if we can look at that, that was their recommendation.
Very good. Excellent. Thanks, Carol. Resolve an issue. Okay. That's it for updates on new business. Addendums? Notice of motion or direct motion? Not aware of any. Closed session, I don't believe we have anything, Mark. Question period. This time we entertain questions if there was anything on the agenda or discussed. The media is shaking their head. Thank you, Mr. Crosby. Anything else? No questions. Municipal Act notices, Mark, I don't believe we have any. Adjournment. We're 3 minutes past, so if you can quickly get that motion out there. Thank you, Councillor Herget. Rebecca moves that we adjourn. I will accept that. Thank you very much. You're within 3 minutes, Mark. Good for you.